stream going. Okay. Okay. All right. Can everyone still hear me okay? All right.
Could I ask if somebody from the Miss Piggy team just lets us scoring judges know who each of the characters are that you guys are playing?
Your Honor, with permission, we'd like to do this during introductions when we start.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, I think we are ready to begin. So let me get the preliminary instructions. I don't think this applies, but if there's anyone who's video recording this presentation, that can only be done with prior permission of the Colorado Bar Association and the event organizers. But you should also know that the Colorado Bar Association may be taking photographs of the competition, and that your participation in the tournament grants automatic permission for the use of these photos by the Colorado Bar Association. I want to make sure, is there anyone in the room who's not a participant in this round of the competition? Okay. There will be no recesses during the competition with the exception of those granted for a health emergency, and particularly there will not be a recess between the final witness examination and the beginning of closing arguments. I have to go through some advisements. First, I want to ask the scoring panelists. I'll start with Ms. O'Brien. Ms. O'Brien, do you have any reason that you would be biased in scoring these two teams?
No, I do not.
Thank you. Ms. Kerrigan, do you have any reason that you'd be biased scoring these two teams?
I do not.
And Mr. Braverman, do you have any reason that you'd be biased scoring these two teams?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Any disputes that arise out of this competition must be reported in accordance with competition rules. I need to remind the teams that your compliance with time requirements will be considered in scoring individual performances. At this point, I'm going to ask each team to introduce their team members and the roles they'll be playing. Let's start with Team Animal. We actually did it previously off the record, but I want to do it for the record.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Tessa Awald, and I will be conducting the direct of Avery Becker and the crossing of Kyle Kuzak.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Leah Farrell, and today I will be direct examining Taylor Perkins, cross-examining Jordan Markowitz, and delivering the closing statement on behalf of the defense.
Okay, and I'm going to stop you for just a minute there. I've just gotten an email asking that the scoring judges turn off their video so that we only see the lawyers who are talking. Thank you. All right, Team Animal, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Elena Medina, and I will be conducting the direct examination of Blake Van Owen, the cross-examination of Alex Cifuentes, as well as delivering the opening statement on behalf of the defense. May our witnesses introduce themselves at this time?
Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, and members of the jury. My name is Sahidi Balaji, and today I am Avery Becker.
Good morning. I am Cedric Eisbert, and I am Taylor Perkins.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Kayla Anderson, and today I'm Professor Blake Van Owen.
Thank you. And then can your scorekeeper introduce him or herself?
Do you mean timekeeper, Your Honor?
Thank you very much. And this is the first time I've presided over one of these competitions this year. How are we handling timekeeping? How will we know, and how will the lawyers know the time?
I have been planning to be typing in the chat instead of handing up cards.
I'm glad we have participants that are smarter than the judge. Thank you. All right, and then for Team Miss Piggy.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Jamie Williamson, and I will be giving the opening statement, conducting the direct examination of Alex Cifuentes, and conducting the cross-examination of Taylor Perkins.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Peter Von Elkenis, and today I'll be conducting the direct examination of Kyle Kuzak and the cross-examination of Professor Blake Van Owen.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Tyler Graham, and I will be conducting the closing statement, conducting the direct of Jordan Markowitz, and the cross of Avery Becker. At this time, the prosecution would like permission for our witnesses to introduce themselves.
Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Eris Horton, and I am Jordan Markowitz.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Josh Moore, and I am Kyle Kuzak.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Mia Von Minden, and I am Alex Cifuentes.
All right, thank you all. Oh, and the timekeeper?
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. I'm Kayla Kniggle, and I'll be keeping time for Miss Piggy.
All right, thank you all. All right, the next thing I have to do is swear in the team members, the witnesses, and the scoring judges. So I'm going to start with team members. Attorneys, would you all turn on your video? Thank you, and I'm going to ask you all to raise your right hands. Team members, do you promise that the presentation you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and the rules of the mock trial competition? All right.
Yes, Your Honor.
Everyone's nodding affirmatively, and that's fine. All right, witnesses. Witnesses, do you promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? You can just nod. All right, thank you all. And then finally, scoring panelists. Ms. O'Brien, can you turn on your video? There you are. All right, if you'd all raise your right hands. Scoring panelists, please raise your, do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition? All right, thank you all. All right, are there any pretrial matters? Let's start with Team Animal.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense requests that due to the virtual setting, lawyers may remain seated for direct and cross-examinations as well as objections.
You may.
On sustained objections, would you like us to request that testimony is stricken from the record, or should we assume that testimony has already been stricken?
You can assume that it's been stricken.
All right. And we would also like to establish the means for presenting evidence. Your Honor, given the virtual nature of the proceedings, we request that during the admission of evidence, the witnesses be allowed to look at the case materials they've been provided in order to identify them for admission. Once identified and admitted, with the court's permission, co-counsel will then publish the exhibit to the jury.
Any objection from Team Miss Piggy?
No, Your Honor.
All right, then that request is granted.
The defense has no further pretrial matters, Your Honor.
All right, for the prosecution?
First, Your Honor, responding to the first stipulation of pretrial matter of the defense, I'm asking permission to have our closer and opener stand during the opening and closing.
They may if they wish, but they can also remain seated if they wish.
All right, thank you. Your Honor, we also ask that the stipulated facts be constructively read into the record.
They will be constructively read into the record.
And finally, we ask that any remaining time reserved from the closing may be used in a rebuttal.
Yes, I'll grant that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Right. If there's nothing else from either side, I think we can start with openings for the prosecution. Team Miss Piggy.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court?
Yes, go ahead.
Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel, my name is Jamie Williamson, and I, along with my co-counsel, Tyler Graham and Peter Von Alkenis, are here today representing the state of Colorado in this case in which the defendant is facing murder in the first degree and burglary in the second degree. On Friday, March 6, 2020, Mackenzie Brackman was found dead in the doorway of his home, having been stabbed in the back. Mackenzie Brackman was many things: a good man, a defense attorney, and an amazing mock trial coach who dedicated the majority of his time to making his students the best they could be, both in and outside the court. Sadly, his time was cut short by one of his very own students. Seeking revenge for being kicked off the mock trial team, Avery Becker went to Mr. Brackman's house that day, just looking for some petty vandalism. But due to a series of unfortunate events, the knife ended up in Mr. Brackman's back. Nothing provokes vengeance like pride. The defendant was in her senior year at high school during the time of the murder, and Mr. Brackman had been her coach for 2 years. Witnesses on both sides of the case will testify to Ms. Becker's terrible relationship with Mr. Brackman. Miss Becker would show up late and unprepared to practice almost every single day, and because of it, the defendant and the victim would argue. One of these arguments led to the vandalism of Mr. Brackman's car. It was Miss Becker's praise and trophies that built up her ego. However, and because of this, but due to a series of unforeseen events, the knife ended up in Mr. Brackman's back. The prosecution today will call 3 witnesses. The detective, 2 experts, and 1 student with firsthand knowledge of both the defendant and the victim. First, you will hear from Detective Jordan Markowitz. Detective Markowitz will discuss what he first noticed when entering the crime scene, how he used cell tower data to place Miss Becker at the scene of the crime, and how he ended up with the main suspect, Avery Becker. Next, you will hear from Kyle Cusack. Mr. Cusack will discuss how scuff marks on the ground, broken household items, and the nature of the wound and blood splatter all indicates a burglary gone wrong, not a planned murder. Finally, you will hear from Alex Fuentes, a good friend of Ms. Becker's and also a fellow mock trial participant. Ms. Becker will testify Ms. Becker's relationship with Mr. Brockman, her prior vandalism of his car, and text messages that Ms. Fuentes received from the defendant, clearly stating their intent to break into Mr. Brockman's home that day and vandalize it. And as we know now, that plan would lead to tragedy. Your Honor, it was Ms. Becker's pride and need for vengeance that got her to Mr. Brockman's back door that day. However, it was her habit of being unprepared and acting on the spot that got the knife in Mr. Brockman's back. Today, the defense will call 3 witnesses: the defendant, the defendant's best friend, and an expert who has only ever testified for the defense. And their case will rely on conspiracy theories alone. Today, the prosecution holds the burden of proof, which means that we will have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Avery Becker is guilty of murder in the first degree and burglary in the second degree. The prosecution will win by presenting facts and logic, rather than trying to find backdoor answers to questions that have already been solved. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. Defense opening?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, for clarification, can you all hear and see me clearly?
I can. I assume everyone else can.
Thank you. May I begin?
Yes.
May it please the court, counsel, members of the jury. Today's story is centered around a sloppy investigation, selective evidence, and a circumstantial case. Now, Ms. Williamson has tried to paint the narrative of a robbery gone wrong and of a girl gone mad. But when we take a closer look, we will find that the prosecution had decided who was guilty before their investigation had even begun. The witnesses of the prosecution failed to look through on the multiple possibilities of this case, pinning the blame on a vulnerable girl instead of giving a man justice. Today, you will hear from Avery Becker, a young girl being wrongfully accused of murdering her mock trial coach. Avery is a natural-born leader who used her skills to her advantage. She excelled in mock trial and brought her team great lengths. Unfortunately, her team didn't always see eye to eye with her, which resulted in some tensions between members as well as her coach. But that tension is the result of teen frustration, and we can all recall a teacher or classmate that we never seemed to get along with. That kind of teen angst is nowhere near enough to drive someone to burglary and cold-blooded murder, especially someone with so much potential like Avery. But despite this, some of them are now trying to pin the blame of this tragedy on her due to the petty drama of a high school club. Today, Avery will tell you about the events leading up to Mr. Brockman's murder, her relationships with those in the team, as well as her story, and how she is not the one to blame for this tragedy. You will also hear from Taylor Perkins, a close friend of Avery and a member of the mock trial team as well. Taylor was a part of the mock trial team as a fun way to pass the time, like many other kids his age. He was often around the team and saw how relationships progressed as time went on, as well as how they could affect the case today. Today, he will tell you his perception about this case, any information he has to bring his coach justice, as well as both his and Avery's placement during the course of events. He will tell you that both he and Avery were together, searching for Avery's lost phone on the day of the murder, meaning that there's no possible way Avery could have committed this crime. However, if that's not enough for you, the prosecution's own Jordan Markowitz will prove this to you through their cell tower investigation, further proving that the prosecution's claim has nothing to fall back on. The prosecution has tried to tell you that all evidence points to Avery Becker, and this is simply not the case. You will hear from Professor Blake Van Owen, a private investigator and expert witness in police practices, forensic evidence, and crime scene reconstruction. She will show you through her investigative work that not only does the prosecution's investigation have flaws beyond conclusion, but how the only way they could have come to this conclusion is through their own clouded judgment and assumptions. She will show you the rushed nature of the prosecution's investigation, as well as how they failed to look into other possibilities of this case, such as Blair Rollins, whose father had sworn revenge against Brackman before going to jail, who was not in school at the time of the murder, and who has disappeared without a trace since the murder. But did the prosecution look into this very alarming lead? Not at all. Professor Van Owen will demonstrate that the prosecution immediately focused solely on Avery Becker instead of looking into other possibilities or answering other obvious questions. Was this an unknown burglar who acted rashly? They don't know. Did Avery accidentally kill her mock trial coach? They don't know. Did Alex Cifuentes, the person who resented Avery the most, set her up to take the fall? They don't know. Or did Blair Rollins need a cover for revenge? They don't know. So many possibilities, and yet so few of them even explored. Today, the burden of proof has been placed upon the prosecution, and unfortunately, they will not be able to prove anything to you. The evidence will show that they had failed to find the true culprit of Mr. Brackman's murder because they made no real effort to do so. The investigation was sloppy, the evidence was selective, and the case is circumstantial. The prosecution had many chances to bring Mr. Brackman justice, but instead, they are willing to send his best student to jail for a crime that she did not commit so they can get an easy way out. One life has already been taken from the Colorado community, and we cannot allow the prosecution to take away another so carelessly. And so at the end of this trial, we ask that you rule in favor of the defendant and declare Avery Becker not guilty of all charges. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is the prosecution ready to call its first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Detective Jordan Markowitz to the stand.
Okay. Detective Markowitz, you are constructively sworn in. And Mr. Graham, you can go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
I am Detective Jordan Markowitz, a homicide detective for the Denver Police Department.
Detective, how long have you been with the Denver Police Department?
13 proud years.
And of those 13 years, you mentioned you were a homicide detective. Now, how long have you been a homicide detective?
7 of those 13 years.
And during your 13 years as a homicide detective, or excuse me, Your Honor, during 13 years as a homicide detective and 13 years with the Denver Police Department and 7 years with the homicide detective, what have you learned?
I've perfected my craft as a cop and a homicide detective. 7 years gave me a lot of experience. I, of course, had on-the-job training all throughout.
And have you got any special certifications with the DPD?
Yes, I hold a cell phone technology and for data recovery certification from the American Academy of Law Enforcement.
And what did you have to do to get that?
I completed an in-depth 3-day training course as well as passed a certification test.
What did you learn in this training?
I learned about all types of cell tower data and records, how to inquire and interpret them. I also learned how to download contents from phones and interpret those through forensic software, especially the Celebrate system.
And have you utilized this training in your job?
Yes, I have worked with over 100 cell phones as well as testified in over 50 cases involving cell tower data analysis.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 702, Detective Jordan Markowitz has testified to their experience and training in the fields of cell phone technology, forensic data recovery, and homicide investigation. And as such, I'd like to enter them as an expert in those fields.
Any objection, Ms. Farrell?
I believe you are muted.
I'm sorry, my space bar must not have worked. I have no objections, Your Honor.
Okay, Detective Markowitz will be recognized as an expert in cell phone technology, electronic data collection, and homicide investigation.
Your Honor, just to clarify, it's forensic data recovery.
Okay, he'll be so recognized.
Detective, why are you here today?
I am here to give my full report regarding the murder of Mackenzie Brackman.
And were you on duty Friday, March 6th of 2020?
I was, yes.
What happened that afternoon?
Well, I was called and I needed to go investigate a potential homicide at 444 Flower Street. And so I did.
What did you observe when you arrived at the scene?
Well, when I first arrived, I saw a body laying in a pool of blood just past the door threshold. There was a bloody knife beside him, and on the doorbell was actually a Ring camera. I noticed that right away as well.
And would you recognize this view if I displayed it to you?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, permission to display Exhibit 1 to the court?
You may.
Trial Tech, please display Exhibit 1. Detective, what is this?
This is the photo of Mr. Brackman's body as well as the Ring camera doorbell I was talking about.
And is this a fair and authentic copy?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, as the witness has authenticated and identified this exhibit, I'd like to move it into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Under Rule 403, this photograph must be excluded because its probative value is substantially outweighed by a danger of unfair prejudice. In this case, the pictures are more prejudicial than probative, as they are likely to inflame the passions of the jury.
Okay. Any response?
Your Honor, prosecution requests a moment to confer with co-counsel.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, just to clarify, the objection was Rule 403.
More prejudicial than probative was the objection, yes.
Your Honor, under Rule 403, it states that it must be excluded if it is under, excuse me, Your Honor. These pictures aren't graphic and simply show the information at the crime scene. And if this photo was to be not allowed into evidence, there would be no substantial proof of anything to show today.
Okay. I don't think that the photograph is unduly graphic. I think it does set out the condition of the crime scene, and the exhibit will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Trial Tech, can you please highlight the Ring camera? Now, Detective, what is a Ring camera?
Well, a Ring camera is a type of doorbell that actually senses motion and starts filming when people come up to the door.
And were you able to recover this footage?
Yes, I was.
And what did it show?
Well, it showed a person approaching the door of average height and build, just like Avery Becker, in fact.
Trial Tech, would you please display Exhibit 5? Now, Detective, what is this photograph?
This is the picture of the knife that I found beside Mr. Brackman.
Your Honor, the witness has authenticated and identified this exhibit, and as such, I'd like to move it into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would like to renew its objection under Rule 403, as we do believe that this knife is more prejudicial than probative. In addition, I do not believe that it serves any purpose that is different from the picture of Exhibit 1, which is previously admitted. In addition, Mr. Graham did not follow the correct evidence admittance procedure when he did not ask if it was a clear and accurate representation.
Okay. I'm going to sustain the objection. You can lay additional foundation.
Detective, you mentioned earlier that there was the knife that killed Mr. Brackman at the scene. How close was it to the body?
It was very close. This is most certainly the murder weapon in this case.
And did it have any bits of excuse my graphic language, but did it have anything that would be potentially disturbing to the jury?
There was a little bit of blood on it, but this is actually important evidence throughout the case, especially given the fact that it's the murder weapon.
Now, Charles, if you would please display Exhibit 5 once again. Now, Detective, can you please re-identify what this exhibit is?
Yes, this is a accurate depiction of the knife at the crime scene.
And is it a clear and accurate copy of Exhibit 5?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, the witness has really newly identified and authenticated this exhibit, and as such, the prosecution would like to remove it into evidence.
Okay, any objection?
I would like to still renew my objection under Rule 403.
Okay. I'm going to find that it is not more prejudicial than probative, and Exhibit 5 is admitted.
Detective, Charles, can you please display Exhibit 1? Detective, what is the significance of where the stab wound is placed?
Well, he was stabbed in the back shoulder, and given the fact he was facing the door, that must mean he was attempting to flee when he was stabbed.
So, did you do any further investigating of the crime scene?
Yes, I did.
And what did you notice?
Well, I immediately noticed that the back gate into the backyard was unlatched, so I entered through the backyard, and upon seeing the open back door, I entered the residence.
And when you were inside, what did you notice?
Well, I immediately entered the kitchen, and beside it was a dining room where there was a toppled chair and a shattered plate. In the kitchen, there was a knife block with a missing knife, as well as an open knife drawer.
Charles, please display Exhibits 7 and 8 side by side. Detective, can you identify these for the court?
Yes, this is the knife block and the open knife drawer, respectively.
And are they a fair and accurate copy?
Yes, they are both fair and accurate copies.
Your Honor, the witness has both authenticated and identified these photographs, and as such, we'd like to move them into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, 7 and 8 are admitted.
Charles, can you please display Exhibit 9? Detective, can you explain this photograph to the court?
Yes, this is the picture of the shattered plate I was previously mentioning in the dining room.
And is it a fair and accurate copy?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, the prosecution would like to move this exhibit into evidence.
All right, any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
9 is admitted.
Charles, thank you. Detective, why were these photos significant?
Well, the broken plate shows that there was a struggle in the dining room, and the open knife drawer and the missing knife in the knife block suggest that a knife was actually taken on the scene, which goes to show that this is a spontaneous crime. There wasn't a knife brought in with the intent to murder. This is clearly a burglary gone wrong.
Now, Detective, what did you do next in your investigation?
Well, I divulged the contents of Mr. Brackman's phone, and I learned all about this program called Mock Trial he was coaching.
And what happened next?
Well, I interviewed the members of the mock trial team that I was teaming, and I actually ended up getting the biggest lead in this case.
And what was the lead?
Well, I interviewed a team member named Alex Cifuentes, and I was informed that Avery Becker had intent to go and trash Mr. Brackman's home.
So did you investigate Avery Becker?
Yes, I did. I attempted to set up an interview. However, she hired a lawyer, and I was unable to properly interview her.
And what did you do next?
Well, from that point, I obtained a warrant and looked through Avery Becker's phone records. I got plenty of data in the form of CDRs.
And would you briefly explain to the court what CDRs are?
Well, CDR stands for Call Detail Records. These essentially show when you receive a message or send a message via phone, it pings off a cell tower and an antenna covering a specific area. So CDRs are records of the times and the cell towers, respectively, when communications are sent. I can track location through it.
And were you able to put anything that showed these?
Yes, I put together a diagram showing Avery Becker's phone record.
Charles, please display exhibit 16. Detective, what is this exhibit?
This is the diagram I was previously talking about.
And is it a fair and accurate copy of your diagram?
Yes, it is.
Detective, I move to enter exhibit 16 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Under Rule 801, we have no objection to the map itself. However, the blue line is hearsay as it purports to be a statement of Ms. Becker's movements on March 6th.
Okay, I just lost the exhibit. Can you put it up again? Any response to that objection?
Your Honor, the witness is not claiming that this is exactly Avery Becker's movement. The witness is simply put together a graph of what shows where the pings were from on the cell phone.
Okay. All right. I'm going to admit exhibit 16. Go ahead.
Now, trial tech, could you please highlight the aforementioned blue line? Now, Detective, can you explain to us what this shows?
Yes, Avery Becker's house is at the top cell tower. Each of these red semicircles are cell tower coverage. So Becker's phone pinged off that top cell tower until she got down a bit further, and it pinged off that middle cell tower. And by the time she got to Brackman's house, it was pinging on the cell tower there.
Detective, given all the evidence you've collected in your investigation, in your expert opinion, what happened on Friday, March 6th of 2020?
Well, these cell phone records clearly place Miss Becker at the scene of the crime on that time and date. She entered through the back door where Mr. Brackman had already armed himself with the knife when he was alerted via the Ring camera system. There was a struggle in the dining room, and Miss Becker grabbed control of the knife, in which, after that point, she stabbed him.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Is that it for your questions?
For now, Your Honor, yes.
Okay. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Detective Markowitz.
Good afternoon.
All right, let's start with the crime scene. You arrived at the crime scene and observed a Ring camera?
Yeah, that is the first question.
Compound question?
I'm sorry?
Compound question, Your Honor.
Overruled. Go ahead.
All right. And the person observed from the video on March 6th was wearing gloves, a hoodie, and a Halloween mask?
Objection, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Assuming evidence not in, or assuming facts not in evidence.
Do you have a response? Ms. Farrell?
Of course, Your Honor. If I may be permitted to lay further foundation.
Okay, go ahead.
Was this Ring camera significant in your investigation?
It played a part. It helped me learn a couple things, mainly just the build and height of Avery Becker, in which those two matched. So I was able to use further evidence to approach my conclusion. The Ring camera videos did show kind of what happened around outside the crime scene, but we're more interested on what happened inside the house and with the cell towers in this specific testimony.
In this video you observed, was the person in the video showing any identifiable features other than height and build?
Well, there are many identifying features, but they were mainly concealed with the clothes they were wearing.
So as you just said, these features were all concealed.
There was some concealment, however, the height and build is the important part. As I was saying, the accumulation of all the evidence is how I derive my conclusion. I do not base my conclusions alone on one piece of evidence. I use the whole entire
All right,
bit
Detective.
of it.
I appreciate your explanation, but I was not asking whether it was a part of your conclusion. And just to clarify, height and build can both easily be altered with clothing and padding.
I mean, height is a bit harder to alter. You can't just make yourself shorter. So I think there's that. And padding, well, it's pretty easy to tell when someone is wearing baggy clothing. But that is not really the important part.
But that is a yes, those can both be altered.
They could be altered hypothetically, yes, although it's not entirely.
All right, now you collected photographs of the blood splatter in the crime scene, correct?
I had the forensic team actually process the crime scene. I didn't collect any photos myself.
Of course, and these photographs are corrupted and cannot be accessed, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
Assuming facts not in evidence.
Ms. Farrell?
I'll lay further foundation, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
Are these photos available now?
Would you remind me which photos you're referring to?
The photos of the blood splatter in the crime scene.
I am not the one that is handling the case and the processing of evidence. I merely arrived at the crime scene and used certain evidence to approach my conclusion. I do not analyze blood spatter as I am not an expert in the field. My expertise lies in crime scene investigation, so I already talked about that, as well as cell phone technology, not blood splatter.
All right, thank you for that. I'll just move on. And Detective Markowitz, I'm sorry to ask you this, but in the future, if you would mind restraining your answers simply to the question that I have asked, just to save time.
I'll try. Some answers are far more nuanced than a simple yes or no. Sometimes I must explain myself to provide the full truth for the court. I hope you understand.
But, to make this easier for you, I will try to keep it able to what is able to be answered by a yes or a no.
All right, thank you. That might be helpful.
Now, let's move on to the cell phone and texts. You tracked Avery Becker's phone's movement from March 6th.
I didn't track the movement exactly. I used CDRs to assemble when the phone was in certain cell tower radiuses and hence was able to track the location at any given point. So in a way, yes, you could say I was finding the movement. As you saw, I put together a map that showed the path she took when she was going to Mr. Brackman's house to murder him.
And Detective Markowitz, a yes would have sufficed, I believe, in that question.
Your Honor, I would like to object on the grounds of badgering. The co-counsel or opposing counsel has repeatedly asked multiple questions that leave room for the witness to explain themselves. And as such, it is all right that they explain themselves as they have not asked straight yes or no questions.
Overruled. Go ahead, Ms. Farrell.
All right. Now, do you know who was in possession of the phone that day?
Well, the phone is registered under Avery Becker, so it would be plausible to anyone with common sense that Avery Becker had the phone. And, well, I even heard it come up at some point that it was like her third kidney, so of course it would be in Avery Becker's possession at the time.
Detective Markowitz, that is not what I was asking. My question was if you knew for absolute certainty who was in possession of the phone.
Well, as I was saying, the phone is registered to Avery Becker, so it is a very reasonable conclusion that it was in Avery Becker's possession.
All right, and in your statement, you say that you did note that the repeated calls and texts from Taylor Perkins all went unanswered. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Objection.
Statement or
Mr. Graham, I believe you may be frozen.
Yeah, Mr. Graham, if you're talking, I'm not hearing it and you don't seem to be moving. Okay, try again.
Basis on the rule of 801, witness statements are hearsay.
Ms. Farrell?
Your Honor, as the witness is testifying today and has made a previous statement which they swore under oath was the truth, I do believe that anything included in his witness statement is relevant information to this case.
Okay, I'm going to find it's appropriate impeachment and overrule the objection. Go ahead.
All right, now you say in your witness statement that you did note that the repeated calls and texts from Taylor Perkins all went unanswered. I would like a yes or no.
There didn't appear to be any communications from Avery Becker's phone. However, the two communications still communicate CDRs, and I'm able to track the phone and the cell tower because of this. It doesn't matter whether or not she replied.
Your Honor, as it seems I am having trouble getting a yes or no answer from the witness that answers the question I have asked, I would ask you that you request that he comply with my questioning.
Okay, I'm going to find that last answer was not responsive to the question and ask that you answer again.
All right, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
You noted that repeated calls and texts from Taylor Perkins all went unanswered.
Well, I believe I did say that, yeah, she didn't send any communications out back to Taylor Perkins. That is indeed what I said.
And the only explanation you bring up in your witness statement for this was that Miss Becker was committing a crime at the time.
Yeah,
Your Honor, I renew my objection of hearsay. I don't see as this is, you overrule the other one as proper steps of impeachment. I don't see how this is impeachment.
Overruled. Go ahead.
In your witness statement, you say that the only explanation for Miss Becker to failing to answer the calls and texts was that she must have been busy committing the crime at this time.
Yeah, all the evidence points that she was committing the crime at that time, and when you're busy, you're not going to answer your phone, so that actually is another clue, indeed.
All right. And did you ever consider that the pattern of multiple calls and texts was in line with a lost phone?
Could you repeat the question?
Did you ever consider that the pattern of multiple calls and texts gone unanswered was in line with a phone that was lost?
Well, the phone was moving. Usually phones don't move themselves when they're lost.
That's not what I was asking. I was asking if you considered that the pattern of the calls and texts from Taylor Perkins was in line with a lost phone.
It does not indicate that the phone was lost, no, as it was moving likely with Avery Becker as she was going to commit the crime.
All right, so that is a no, you never considered it.
Objection, Your Honor. I have two objections: badgering and asked and answered.
Overruled. Go ahead.
All right, now, did you obtain cell tower records to determine the location of the phone from the day before when Miss Becker says her phone was lost to see if it was in fact lost?
I'm more interested in the day of the murder, so my warrant that I obtained from a judge stated I was allowed to search the cell records on the day of the murder, not the day before.
All right. And you say you received screenshots of incriminating texts from Alex Cifuentes.
I said I received communications, yes. I did not yet mention screenshots.
All right, considering these texts are very important, would you mind All right, Detective Markowitz, these texts are extremely important, and just for the benefit of the jury, as I believe that we will not have a fair trial if we do not cover them, despite them not being covered in your direct examination. Your Honor, would it be okay if I were to briefly explain what these texts are?
Yes, and you can display them just to me, not to the jury.
All right, co-counsel, would you mind briefly displaying these texts to the jury? All right. Well, the contents of these texts outline a plan that Avery Becker told Alex Cifuentes that allegedly she was going to break into Coach Brackman's house.
Your Honor, I
Mark,
think I would object here.
Go ahead.
On the grounds of, I'd like to object here, Your Honor, on the grounds of foundation as well as hearsay, as these are not, Your Honor, having the attorney explain what an exhibit is to the court does not seem like proper court procedure.
Okay, I thought that she was going to have the witness explain. Maybe I was wrong. Can you respond?
would you like me to have the witness explain?
Okay. Well, if you were going to explain what it is, I'm going to sustain the objection.
Okay.
Why don't you ask your next question?
All right. Now, these communications you received from Ms. Cifuentes, is it Miss? I'm sorry.
Yes, Ms. Cifuentes is a female.
To make sure I had that right. Now, these communications you received, you did not see the original versions of them.
Well, you'd have to elaborate on what you mean by original versions. This is the text that I received that outline Avery Becker's plan to wait until Brackman's at work and break in and trash the place.
All right, and these communications you received are screenshots.
Well, it is very normal for a person I'm interviewing to be nervous. So they forgot their phone at home. So as just a kindness and courtesy, since I could see she was shaken, I simply asked her to send me screenshots since they convey the same exact words that I need for my investigation.
All right, now you found, and did you, so just to clarify, you never followed up and secured the original non-screenshot text evidence of these communications. A yes or no will suffice.
This is sufficient evidence that I have obtained. These are the text messages that were sent between Alex Cifuentes and Avery Becker.
And do you have any way to know for absolute certain that these text messages are authentic? A yes or no will suffice, detective.
It says Avery Becker's name on the top there. So these messages were sent by Avery Becker. So it is very apparent that these are authentic. And Alex Cifuentes can attest to this.
Yet you never saw the original versions.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
I believe you're frozen again, Mr. Graham.
Your Honor, I object on the grounds of asked and answered.
Overruled.
You never saw the original versions of these texts. Please give me a one-word yes or no answer, Detective Markowitz.
Are you meaning like on Alex Cifuentes' phone? Is that what you're meaning by original?
That is what I mean.
No, I didn't look through Alex Cifuentes' phone. She is not in any trouble.
All right. Now, let's briefly touch on what you did not do. You state in your witness statement that you did consider the murder could have been the work of a disgruntled ex-client.
Well, that's what I initially thought. However, after looking at all the evidence in this case, especially with the cell towers, the motive from these texts, it's clearly Avery Becker, and the evidence is just overwhelming.
That is, I do not require additional answers, Mr. Markowitz. Blair Rollins is another suspect in this case, correct? And please restrain your answer to only the question I have asked.
Blair Rollins is not my suspect, no. I didn't investigate Blair Rollins. There's no evidence to indicate this. Avery Becker is the person at trial here. She's the suspect.
You're aware that the prosecution's expert, Kyle Cusack, lists Blair Rollins as a suspect in their information tracking sheet?
Objection, Your Honor. Outside the scope.
Overruled. It's proper impeachment.
Detective Markowitz?
Would you please re-ask the question?
You're aware that the prosecution's expert, Kyle Cusack, lists Blair Rollins as a suspect in their information tracking sheet?
I'm here testifying on my own
Your Honor, objection. I'd like to change my objection to assuming facts, not in evidence.
Overruled. And I'm going to direct the witness to answer the question. The question was whether or not you were aware that this statement of another witness exists.
I'm only testifying as to my statement and not Mr. Kuzak's.
Right.
Well, I'm not done talking to the witness. The detective, you don't get to decide what you're testifying to. If you're aware of this, you should say that you are. If you're not aware of it, you should say that you're not.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. I meant that I'm not really aware of what Mr. Kuzak will be testifying to or has included in his evidence per se.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
So you haven't read the report from your own crime scene reconstruction expert?
I conducted my investigation before Mr. Kuzak.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
All right. May I redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
No, Detective, earlier opposing counsel mentioned that or would you clarify what opposing counsel meant when they asked if you were tracking the phone?
Yes, I was using CDRs to place the phone at certain pinpoints at different times, and then I used these to draw essentially where Avery Becker was and was heading to.
And is it fairly accurate?
Yes, it is. I'm able to see the cell tower coverages and placed Avery Becker within all three coverage zones.
And using your tracking sheet, was it pretty definitive that that is what happened?
Yes, it is. Mr. Brackman's house is the key location in that bottom cell tower.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions for Detective Markowitz at this time.
All right. And Mr. Graham, in my courtroom, I typically don't allow recross. Under the rules of the competition, do we allow recross?
Your Honor, it normally goes by the discretion of the judge. So some judges do and some judges don't.
Okay. All right. So the way I'm going to handle this trial is if I get a request for recross, I'll address it at the time, but otherwise I won't be allowing recross. Right. Thank you, Detective.
Thank you, Your Honor.
People can call their next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution would like to call Kyle Kuzak to the stand.
All right. Ms. Kuzak, you're objectively sworn. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Kyle. Would you please state your name for the court?
My name is Kyle Kuzak.
And why were you called into court today?
I was called into court today to give y'all, or walk y'all through what happened on the day Mackenzie Brackman was murdered in his home.
And what do you do for an occupation?
Why, I'm a CSR investigator with the city of Denver.
And how long have you been a crime scene reconstruction investigator?
For 19 years, the last 3 of which have been with the city of Denver.
Thank you. And what did you do to become a crime scene reconstruction investigator?
I personally took multiple 40-hour classes in the odds and ins and outs of the CSR field. Most important to this case would be the blood stain and spatter analysis, crime scene documentation, and crime scene photography.
Thank you. Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 702, testimony by expert, and Rule 703, basis of an expert's opinion, the prosecution would now like to tender Kyle Kuzak as an expert in crime scene reconstruction, crime scene photography, blood splatter and pattern analysis, and crime scene documentation due to his 40-hour training in each course and his extensive 19 years of being a crime scene reconstruction investigator.
Any objection?
Yes, the defense would like to do a voir dire.
You may go ahead.
I would like to start with your qualifications. You stated today that you have experience as a crime scene investigator.
Of course, 19 years of it.
But you haven't provided a resume or CV to document where you worked?
No, but I did not need to.
No record of any training or specialized education?
Oh, I wouldn't bother finding those in my files.
No indication of the number of homicides or burglaries you've investigated?
I've worked for 19 years. You lose track after 19.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 702, we object to this witness being admitted as an expert on the grounds that they have provided no evidence that they possess the knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education to be qualified as such.
Okay. Does prosecution have any additional foundation they can lay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Kuzak, with your 19 years, have you done many investigated many murder cases?
Oh, I've lost count of how many cases I've investigated.
And were they similar to this case?
A few of them were.
Thank you. Your Honor, I would now like to reinstate 702 testimony by expert and 703 basis of an expert's opinion. And I now tender Kyle Kuzak as an expert in blood spattern and pattern analysis, crime scene photography, crime scene documentation, and that's it. And crime scene reconstruction. My apologies, due to his 40-hour training and his 19 years of being a crime scene reconstruction expert in this field.
Any objection?
I stand by my objection of pursuant to Rule 702.
All right. The witness will be recognized as an expert in the areas listed. Go ahead.
All right, Mr. Kuzak. Let's go over to the general process of a crime scene reconstruction investigator. So do you do anything specific to conduct the research?
I follow a 5-step method that I've narrowed down into 4.
Thank you. And how do you present that 4-step method?
The 4-step method would be documenting and collecting evidence from a crime scene, bringing it to the lab to organize and formulate, forming a hypothesis, and finally testing this hypothesis to prove if it's right or not.
And how did you say you presented this?
I present this as a flowchart, which also includes the evidence tracking sheet and the witness tracking sheet.
So, Mr. Kuzak, if I placed that in-depth report and flowchart in front of you, would you recognize it?
Of course.
Trial Tech, can you please present a clean and unmarked copy of Exhibit 17? Thank you. And is this an accurate and unmarked copy of your report?
Why, yes, it is.
And does that flowchart right there reflect your work completely accurately?
That is, to my knowledge, my flowchart.
Thank you. Pursuant to Rule 901, the pictures have been identified and authenticated, and I'd now like to submit them into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
The flowchart will be admitted. Does it have it? Was it marked as an exhibit?
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm sorry. What was the designation?
Exhibit, I believe I said Exhibit 17.
17. Okay. All right. It will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Permission to publish to the jury?
You may.
So, Mr. Kuzak, now let's talk about what happened on the day of the murder on your flowchart, of course. So, what's that outline of the blue column on the left?
The blue column indicates what happened when the perpetrator arrived towards the household. The perpetrator would have approached the residence with an intent to break into and vandalize the building. The perpetrator tested the front door, went around through the gate to the back, and tried that for access.
Thank you. And what about that green and turquoise-ish column right there in the middle?
The green column is what happened when the intruder entered the building. The intruder entered the residence through the kitchen, and here's where the timeline could split. That is the turquoise. Either Mr. Brackman armed himself with a knife by a e-notice, or armed himself by the knife by knocking at the door and a door opening it and shutting in the back. Afterwards, the defendant and the victim encountered in the kitchen, had an altercation.
Thank you. Mr. Kuzak, what about that last red and orangish column right there?
Of course, this would be the orange and red crime column. The victim was stabbed. Scuff marks were created on the ground. A plate was broken as they moved throughout the house towards the front door. The defendant fled through the front door. The victim removed the knife, collapsed, and bled out and died.
And that is an accurate report of how you think the altercation took place?
Why, yes, it is.
Thank you. And now the scuff marks that you mentioned, is there any physical evidence of this?
Of course, there's a photo of them.
So, Mr. Kuzak, if you were to see these pictures in person, or on the screen, of course, would you recognize them?
Why, yes, I would.
Permission to show the court Exhibit 18.
May?
So, Mr. Kuzak, those scuff marks on the left, are those an accurate and unmarked copy of the scuff marks previously mentioned?
Why, yes, they are.
Thank you. Pursuant to Rule 901, the witness has identified and authenticated the unmarked exhibit, and I'd now like to place them into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
18 is admitted.
Thank you. Now, what do these scuff marks on the right and that broken plate previously entered as evidence prove?
The broken plate shows how the scuff marks, if I may, show how the defendant and the victim had a fight when the defendant was first found intruding upon Mr. Brackman's house. The plate shows how this fight moved throughout the house, being chaotic and unplanned and messy.
Thank you. So, Mr. Kuzak, is your analysis of this case the only correct outcome?
Based upon the evidence provided to me and the evidence I gathered, along with 19 years of experience with multiple cases similar to this, I believe that my expert opinion is the correct and analysis is the correct one.
Thank you. So now, based upon all of this, what is your expert opinion on what happened at Mackenzie Brackman's house on March 6, 2020?
It is my expert opinion that Avery Becker traveled to the home of Mr. Brackman, intruded upon the residence through the back door, was attacked by Mr. Brackman while she invaded this house, and then then stabbed Mr. Brackman and fled through the front door, leaving Mr. Brackman to die.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
All right, cross-examination.
Your Honor, I am very sorry to interrupt, but it seems as though there may be a little bit of a time discrepancy. I currently have 4 minutes and 45 seconds, but it looks like the other team may have a little bit more than that. How do you want us to address this?
Okay, what does the other team have?
Your Honor, I have 6 minutes.
All right, let's see whether it becomes an issue.
Okay.
If we get to the point where if we run out of time, we'll address it at that point.
Okay, Your Honor.
When I say run out of time, I mean the person who has less time's time.
Okay.
Your Honor, may I ask a clarifying question for timing?
Sure.
I know we stopped for objections, but do we stop when they are talking to the court?
No, just for objections.
Understood, Your Honor. Thank you.
I guess let me ask you to clarify your question. When you say talking to the court, are you talking about talking to the court as part of an objection or something else?
No, Your Honor, when they ask you whether or not they can show like the exhibits and whatnot.
Yeah, it doesn't stop for that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. All right, cross-examination.
Before we start, may I get a time check?
You have, it looks like 6 minutes and 39 seconds.
Thank you. I'd like to begin with your conclusions in this case. You stated that this was clearly a burglary gone wrong.
I do not believe I said those words, but it was a breaking and entering that was attempting to vandalize the residence that then turned into this murder.
But then you stated that the intruder likely chose the time of day for your own imagined reason.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. Then you speculate that the intruder likely chose the time of day for your own imagined reason.
I don't speculate this, but I do believe that the intruder chose the time of day for a reason.
Let's talk about your review of the crime scene evidence. Your analysis of blood spray and cast off blood splatter droplets were based off of photos taken by the police?
Those photos were sadly corrupted, of course, but yes, they were partially based off of those photos.
But those photos were corrupted, so your analysis cannot be independently verified.
I do believe I said they were corrupted, and of course, I did not only use those.
Thank you. And you also admit that you were not able to recreate all event segments?
Specifically, the timeline on whether or not Mr. Brackman was alerted by e-notice or by knocking at the door.
Thank you. I would request you respond with a yes or no, please. Thank you.
I will respond with a yes or no if it is able to be responded with yes or no, and if you ask.
Thank you. And you had evidence that you could not place?
By what specifically do you mean?
You did have evidence that you could not replace in this case that you were given.
Could you clarify anything specifically?
I'll move on. You also speculate that scuff marks on the floor of the kitchen are evidence of a struggle for the knife?
I don't know about a struggle for the knife, but I do believe it was a struggle between the defendant and the victim.
But you do imply that there was a struggle.
Of course.
But you can't say for certain when those scuff marks were made.
I can reasonably assume that they were created by that, of course.
Let's move on to other possible theories. The expert witness for the defense, Professor Van Owen, gave a statement that contradicts your conclusions in this case.
I believe he did.
And you admit that Professor Van Owen's conclusions are outside your own expertise?
Some of them are, like the cell phone data, but that falls under Markowitz's.
Thank you. But in your comprehensive, thorough investigation, you didn't note in your witness tracking sheet that Avery Becker claimed to have been set up by 2 other suspects?
I did not interview Mr. Becker. Miss Becker.
You didn't note that Taylor Perkins also supported that theory?
I did not interview any of the witnesses about this specifically.
We'll move on. You list Blair Rollins as a suspect in your witness information tracking sheet?
Of course, we thought of many suspects.
And you didn't note that the route from Blair Rollins' house would match the cell tower information provided by Detective Markowitz?
I have no way to answer that correctly because I am not an expert in cell phone reconstruction.
Are you aware that there is a recording of Jonathan Rollins promising to get revenge on Mackenzie Brackman?
I know that there is a recording of their case, but once again, I have not seen or heard that yet. Would you like me to answer about it anyways?
No, thank you. But you didn't include that in your thorough and comprehensive investigation.
Why, I don't even believe Professor Van Owens includes the whole case.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, a very brief one. So, Mr. Kuzak, did you listen to the statement that the opposing counsel brought up about Blair Rollins?
I listened to the snippet provided to me, but I did not listen to the entire case.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
All right, thank you. The prosecution ready with their next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Alex Fuentes.
Okay. The witness is constructively sworn. You may go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Fuentes.
Good afternoon.
Before we begin, can I have Your Honor, can I have a brief time check?
I have that you have 4 minutes and 22 seconds remaining.
Your Honor, I have.
All right. Could you, Ms. Fuentes, could you state your name for the jury?
My name is Alex Fuentes.
Mr. Fuentes, why are you here today?
I'm here today because I'm good friends with the defendant, Avery Becker, and I also knew Coach Brockman. He was my mock trial coach.
We'll get right into it, Mr. Fuentes. Can you tell us a bit about your relationship with Ms. Becker on the mock trial team?
Yeah, me and Avery were good friends, and Avery was actually the one who introduced me to mock trial and convinced me to try out.
And how was Ms. Becker as a teammate?
Avery was really good at making things up on the fly, but it left the whole team on the tip of their toes, not really knowing what Avery was going to do. Avery also came late and unprepared to most practices.
And how did Mr. Brockman deal with this?
Coach Brockman, they always and Avery always had a frustrating relationship, so it definitely didn't help. And at some point, their relationship reached a boiling point, and Coach Brockman kicked Avery off of the team and demoted Avery to the B team.
And did Miss Becker remain on the B team?
No, actually, I don't know how Avery did it, but Avery somehow convinced Taylor Perkins to quit the team, and that forced Coach Brockman to bring Avery back up to the A team.
And did the problems continue after she was back on the A team?
Yeah, they did. I remember after regionals, there was this huge argument, and it left Avery visibly infuriated, and Avery left practice in anger and grabbed a permanent marker and wrote "Worst Attorney Award" across the hood of Mr. Brockman's Porsche.
Wow. And how did Mr. Brockman react to this?
He was angry and disappointed in Avery, and he kicked Avery off of the team for good.
And were you contacted by Miss Becker after she was kicked off the team?
Yeah, Avery sent me a text to ask for a favor.
And would you recognize these text messages if you saw them?
I would, yes.
Your Honor, permission for the witness to view Exhibit 14.
Go ahead.
Mr. Moore, thank you. Mrs. Fuentes, could you identify this for the court?
These are the text messages that Avery sent me, and I know it's Avery because it's Avery's contact that I texted Avery with.
And is this like fair and accurate copy?
It is, yes.
Your Honor, at this time we moved the identified and authenticated Exhibit 14 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense objects to the admission of Exhibit 14 into evidence under hearsay as pertinent to Rule 801, as well as the best evidence rule under Rules 1002, 1003, as well as 1004.
Okay, response?
Your Honor, this is not hearsay, as we are the text messages from Avery Becker will be admitted as is an exception of hearsay, as it is a statement of a party opponent. In addition, the text messages from Alex Fuentes is being offered not for the truth of the matter asserted, rather the effect it had on the listener. And could you remind me of the last objection and specifically why?
Yes, of course. The second objection is under best evidence. Under Rule 1002, an original writing, recording, or photograph is required in order to prove its content. In this case, these are not the original text, but rather screenshots. Under Rule 1003, these copies cannot be admitted because under Rule 1003, there is a genuine question about the original's authenticity, because we believe the text may have been fabricated. And in addition to this, under Rule 1004, admissibility of other evidence of content, an original is not required, and other evidence of the content of a writing, recording, or photograph is admissible if A, all the originals are lost or destroyed and not by the proponent acting in bad faith. Not enough foundation has been laid to establish that the originals have been lost or destroyed, as well as we do believe the proponent may have destroyed these in bad faith.
Okay, so just a second. Ms. Medina, I just want you to address for me, if you would, what's your basis for believing that these were fabricated?
There is a genuine question, as Avery will testify under oath that she did not send these texts to Alex Fuentes.
Okay, all right.
Your Honor.
Final response?
Your Honor, first of all, there is no genuine concern regarding the authenticity, as these are exactly the screenshot text messages sent to the detective. If the defense wants to argue the authenticity on Alex's part, they may do so in cross-examination, but as there is no genuine concern to the authenticity, and duplicates are allowed if there is no genuine concern to authenticity. This is admissible.
All right. Before I admit it, I'm going to ask you to lay a bit more foundation about how this screenshot was created and who created it.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Fuentes, Mr. Fuentes, after the murder of Mr. Brockman, were you contacted by anyone?
I was. The detective of the case called me and I told him about the screenshots or the text messages, and he called me in for a phone interview.
When you were at the interview, did they request anything of you?
They asked for the conversation, but I left my phone at home charging and I offered to bring it in the next day, but the police said that screenshots would be fine, and I did what the police told me to do.
Your Honor, at this time, may we retry to move the identified and authenticated Exhibit 14 to evidence?
Okay, you want any other objection other than what you've already stated, Ms. Medina?
No additional objections, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm going to allow the exhibit.
All right, Mr. Fuentes. Could you briefly tell us the context of what's going on in these text messages?
Avery asked me to talk to Coach Brockman about getting Avery back on the team, which I did. But before I did, I told Avery that I didn't think Coach would allow Avery back on the team.
And did you go to anyone prior to this trial? Did you go to anyone prior to being contacted about these text messages?
No, unfortunately, and I really wish I did, but never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that one of my good friends would have done anything like that.
And Ms. Fuentes, do you see it differently now?
I do. It's clear to me that Avery told me what she was going to do, then did it, and even took it a step further and murdered Coach Brockman.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, may I have a brief time check?
You have 2 minutes and 53 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Fuentes. I'd like to start with your time on the mock trial team. You were on the CHS mock trial team at the same time as Avery Becker, correct?
I joined the team 1 year after Avery, but yes, I was on the team.
And you claim that you and Avery were best friends and teammates who supported each other.
I thought we were.
However, you say that Avery was coasting on her good looks and didn't have any real talent or skill.
Avery was attractive, and it definitely does play a factor in the mock trial.
Ms. Fuentes, that wasn't my question, and moving forward, I request that you answer with either a yes or no. And in addition to this, you thought that the team would be better off without Avery on it.
For the team's sake, I did.
I'd like to move on to what happened after the tragedy. You were called in for an interview at the police station, correct?
I was, after I got a call from the detective and I told him about the texts.
And what became the topic of this interview was to discuss the text messages on your phone.
That was the topic.
And unfortunately, this phone was left behind at your home at the time of the interview.
It was left charging, and everyone forgets things sometimes.
I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit 14. Co-counsel should be publishing that. Thank you. Now, I'd like to discuss an inconsistency between your statement to the police and the text you claim to have exchanged with Avery Becker. You told the police that Avery had asked you to convince Brackman to let Avery back on the team.
I did, yeah.
And you asked Brackman?
I did talk to Brackman after I told Avery.
And he said no?
Yeah, he said no.
And then you told Avery that the answer was no?
I think you may have misunderstood things, but I actually texted first and then I told Avery.
Your Honor?
Or then I talked to Coach Brockman.
Your Honor, may I interrupt for a minute?
I'm sorry, what?
Your Honor, these text messages are not the most recent addition to the text messages and is not the best evidence available.
Is this different than the exhibit that I admitted?
Yes, Your Honor, the mock trial updated their text messages screenshots, and you can see in the top left, it says to text me on their top left, and in our exhibits, those have been corrected since the first. Yeah.
So are you telling me that this not?
My apologies.
Okay.
Ms. William, could you please repeat what you stated?
All right. I'm sorry, but these are the text messages that the original case provided. However, they had to update it due to the text me at the top left, which they did not want to be a part of the case.
Okay, so if part of this exhibit or one of these versions is not a correct part of the materials for the mock trial, then we shouldn't be talking about it.
All right, Your Honor, I'll move on. Now, Mr. Fuentes, in your testimony to the police, you stated that these are the alleged screenshots that you sent to the detective.
I followed what the police told me to do and sent screenshots.
And now you claim to no longer have this crucial piece of evidence, this phone, in your possession?
My battery on my phone was getting really old and I traded it in. I didn't really think it was a big deal.
And therefore you have no idea where it is now?
No, I don't.
And so in the end, Avery says that these messages were faked, and because you got rid of your phone, there's no way to prove that these messages were real. A yes or no will suffice.
Well, if they're not real, I wouldn't know. I thought it was Avery who was texting me.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. Does the prosecution have any time left for a redirect?
No, Your Honor. They do
No,
not.
Your Honor. Oh.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right, thank you. All right, is the defense ready to call their first witness?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense would like to call Avery Becker to the stand.
All right. All right, just a second. The witness is constructively sworn in. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Becker.
Good afternoon.
Can you state your name and spell it for the court?
Yes, my name is Avery Becker, and that's spelled Averybecker.
I'd like to start with some background information. What is your relationship to Mackenzie Brackman?
Well, Coach Brackman was the coach on my mock trial team at Colorado High School. I had done mock trial for a while, so me and Coach Brackman were pretty close and knew each other very well.
And when did you join the mock trial team?
I joined my freshman year, and I have been doing it all 4 years of high school.
And what was mock trial like with Coach Brackman?
Mock trial was really fun for me. I was on a successful team, we won regionals, and I did it for all 4 years of high school, so I'd say I was pretty committed to it.
And how was Mr. Brackman as a coach?
Well, first, I just want to say that I was completely shocked and saddened to hear about what happened to Coach Brackman. But if I have to be honest, Brackman and I didn't always see eye to eye on everything. But in hindsight, he did get our team to a place where we were competitive, and I could tell he cared a lot about his students.
How many times have you been to his house for mock trial or other reasons?
Never. I didn't even know where Coach Brackman lived.
And now let's turn to your relationship between you and Taylor Perkins. Who's Taylor?
Taylor was my best friend on the mock trial team. Usually during practice, we use it as a time to hang out with each other, text each other, normal things that teenagers do in after-school activities.
And how did Coach Brackman respond to this?
Well, Coach Brackman seemed to get a little upset whenever he thought we were not paying attention. And he actually ended up demoting me down to the B team because I guess he felt that we would be able to pay attention better if we were on separate teams.
I'd also like to discuss your relationship with Alex Cifuentes. What is your relationship with Alex?
Well, Alex was another teammate of ours on the mock trial team. I really wouldn't consider us to be friends. We never really got along.
What was it like being on the team with Alex?
Personally, I felt that Alex wanted me off the team so that he could be named, or she could be named best attorney.
Oh, sorry. Your Honor. My apologies.
Yep. Go ahead, Ms. Awad.
I'm sorry, I did not hear the objection.
I don't think it was an objection.
Oh, my problem. I will go on, sorry. What was the nature of your relationship outside of school with Alex?
Well, like I mentioned before, Alex and I weren't necessarily friends, so we didn't have much of a relationship outside of school. And those text messages that Alex claims that I sent them, I never sent those, and I don't even know what they say.
Now, let's focus on what happened when you got removed from the team. What was going on beforehand?
Well, honestly, I was pretty upset because Coach Brackman never gave us any of the credit for the work that we did. He constantly criticized my work and the work of others. And like I mentioned before, he demoted me down to the B team, which personally I felt wasn't good for the A team.
And why were you removed from the team?
I made one of the worst mistakes after practice one day. I was at the whiteboard that we used to outline good and bad things that we do during.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
This is narration.
Do you have a response?
Yes, the witness was simply just adding details into what was happening, why they were removed from the team.
Okay, overruled. Go ahead.
And then what happened?
Well, like I mentioned, I was at the whiteboard outlining good and bad things I did during competitions. I got frustrated with a couple comments Coach Brackman made about me and left the room with the whiteboard markers still in my hand.
And what happened afterwards?
Well, I walked out and saw Coach Brackman's car and ended up writing the worst attorney award on the hood of his car.
And what were you thinking in that moment?
In that moment, I was so angry that I wanted him to know exactly what I thought. But that wasn't what I thought at all, and I never should have done it.
What happened afterwards?
Turns out I made an even bigger mistake because the marker I had used was a permanent marker, and I just didn't realize it.
And then what happened?
Well, when Brackman found out, he kicked me off the team for good.
What did you do afterwards?
Well, I was very upset. I had been on the team for 4 years, and it meant a lot to me. So I went home crying, and my mom told me that I should just go back and apologize.
I'm sorry?
This is hearsay.
You have a response?
This is in the statement of the witness that they talked to their mother in this case.
Okay, well, statements of another witness, regardless of whether they're in this witness statement or not, are still hearsay, so sustained.
Did you offer to do anything for Coach Brackman?
Yes, I offered to scrub his car. I offered to get a job to have the car repainted. I even tried to apologize many times, but Coach Brackman ignored me, and I'm devastated I never got a chance to apologize in person.
Finally, the prosecution introduced testimony about the alleged whereabouts of your phone, and I'd like to talk to you about your phone and when you last saw it. When did you last see your phone?
I last saw my phone on March 5th, and I haven't seen it since.
And where do you think you lost it?
Well, on March 5th, Taylor and I went to the Fry Shack, and then we went to the mall. But at the Fry Shack, there were a bunch of mock trial people there, including Alex.
Was there any interactions between you and Alex?
Yes, I let Alex play a game on my phone.
What happened to your phone?
I woke up on March 6th and realized I didn't have it.
What did you do to try to find it?
Well, Taylor had his phone. So, or actually, before that, I went to Taylor's house and we decided to skip school in order to go look for it.
What ways did you try to find your phone?
Well, like I started to say before, Taylor had his phone, so he tried calling and texting it, but we assumed it was either dead or stolen because it kept going immediately to voicemail.
Thank you. Finally, I'd like to talk about Blair Rollins. How familiar are you with Blair Rollins?
I mean, we weren't friends or anything, but they went to my school and everybody knows who they are.
Did it appear to you that Alex and Blair were friends?
Yeah, they seemed to hang out.
What do you know about Blair Rollins' relationship with Brackman?
Well, to my knowledge, I don't think Blair Rollins liked Coach Brackman all that much.
Why do you say that?
Well, everybody knows that Coach Brackman lost the case that sent Rollins' father to jail.
Are you aware of the ring videos?
Yes, I'm aware of the ring videos.
In the video, there is a figure. Do you recognize this figure?
Yes, I do. Sorry. I must have heard your question wrong. Could you repeat it?
Yes. In the video, there's a figure. Do you recognize this figure?
No, I don't recognize this figure. And honestly, I'm a little confused as to why people think it's me.
And why is that?
Because this could easily be mistaken for anybody else with the same general build and height as me.
Does that look like anyone else?
Yeah, it could easily be mistaken as Blair Rollins.
Why do you say that?
You couldn't see the face, and anyone who saw me and Blair walking away would
Objection.
not.
Objection.
Speculation, the witness is not, or outside the scope, the witness does not testify to qualify as to who would consider a different witness as what was in the videos?
Ms. Awad?
This is based on the rationally based perception of Avery viewing the videos.
I'm going to overrule the objection. You can answer the question.
All right. Would you like me to repeat that, Ms.
Yes,
Becker?
please.
And why do you say that?
Well, you couldn't see the face, and anyone who saw me and Blair walking away, or me and Roland's walking away, could easily confuse the two of us. And
Objection.
now,
What's the objection?
I'd like to object to speculation.
Okay, overruled. I think it's just an opinion based on her knowledge of her build and this other person's build. Go ahead.
Would
and
you like-
now, oh, my apologies.
My apologies. Would you like to finish that sentence?
Yes, please. And now Blair's disappeared.
Thank you. Did you kill Mackenzie Brackman?
No, I did not kill Mackenzie Brackman.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Becker, you attend Colorado High School, correct?
I attended previously, but yes.
And you were on the mock trial team for 4 years, correct?
Correct.
And now Mr. Brackman coached your mock trial team. Would that be correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And it's your belief that you and Mr. Brackman didn't get along?
Yeah, we didn't always see eye to eye on everything.
And isn't it true you guys would argue at almost every practice?
We argued frequently, but like I said, we didn't get along all the time. I don't think anybody gets along all the time.
And didn't Mr. Brackman say you were lazy?
Yeah, he made a couple comments about me that were pretty harsh.
Such as he also said you didn't put in the work, correct?
Yeah, I guess he felt that way.
And Mr. Brackman said he hated your work ethic. Would that be correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Objection, relevance?
What's the relevance?
Oh, Your Honor, this goes to the relationship between the defendant and the victim, and as such, it is extremely relevant.
Okay, overruled. Go ahead.
Ms. Becker, I'd like to talk about Mr. Brackman demoting you to B team. Now, isn't it true you were on A team up until about a month before regionals?
Yes, that is true.
And then Mr. Brackman demoted you to B team, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, isn't it true that you thought B team was full of losers?
Well, I was on the A team, and I guess the B team was a little less experienced than I was. Mr. Graham, I think you are frozen.
Yes, I briefly froze. Sorry, could you restate your answer?
Yes, I said I guess the B team was a little bit less experienced than I was.
Ms. Becker, that's not the question I'm asking. Did you think B team was full of losers?
I guess I said that in my statement, but like I mentioned before.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. I'd like to ask you a few questions about Taylor Perkins. Now, you and Taylor Perkins consider each other to be best friends, correct?
Yes.
And isn't it true that Taylor Perkins left A team so Mr. Brackman would be forced to put you back on?
I guess that's the information Taylor relayed to me, but there could have been several other reasons. I can't speculate as to what Taylor thought that he was doing when he quit the team.
Now, didn't Mr. Brackman say he wasn't surprised you got your little crony to bail you out of A team, B team?
That's what Coach Brackman thought, but that's not how that played out at all.
Now, Mr. Brackman said you and Taylor Perkins were sidekicks, correct?
Yeah, we were very good friends.
So you agree that you were considered sidekick. Now, Taylor Perkins is testifying against the accusation that you murdered Mr. Brackman now, correct?
Yeah, that is true.
Ms. Becker, isn't it true you vandalized Mr. Brackman's car?
Yes, it was a stupid mistake.
And is it your testimony today that you were writing on the whiteboard when Mr. Brackman walked in?
I was writing the good and bad things we did at competition at the whiteboard, yes.
Child Tech, would you please pull up the witness's exhibit or witness's testimony? Specifically, line 91. Child Tech.
Your Honor, if I may, what
Yes.
page, Mr. Graham?
Page 36, Trial Tech, my apologies.
Thank you.
Now, Ms. Becker, do you remember making a sworn statement before you came into court today?
Yes, I do.
And are you aware that you can change your statement up until any point before the meeting or before trial starts?
Yes, I am aware.
And is this a fair and accurate copy of your statement?
Yes, it is.
Charlton, if you would please highlight on line 91 where it says, I was just about to write all the good things I had done. Now, Ms. Becker, you understand this is your sworn statement, correct?
I believe that's what I said.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlton. Ms. Becker, what did you write on Mr. Brackman's car?
I ended up writing Worst Attorney Award on the hood of his car.
And after this, Mr. Brackman kicked you off of both teams, correct?
Yes, he did.
Objection, improper character evidence regarding to the car.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Now, Ms. Becker, isn't it true you said to your mom you would get back at Mr. Brackman if it was the last thing you did?
I wasn't thinking straight at all that day, and you can probably tell by the fact that I made a stupid mistake earlier. So yes, I might have said those words, but I wasn't in the right frame of mind.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. And you never apologized to Mr. Brackman, correct?
For what?
For writing Worst Attorney Award on his car. You never apologized.
I never got the chance, but I tried repeatedly.
I heard a yes. And now I'd like to talk about March 6th. Isn't it true that you and Taylor Perkins ditched school that day?
Yes, we were looking for my lost phone.
I'd like to turn your attention to Exhibit 14. Now, this is a screenshot of a conversation between your phone and Alex Fuentes' phone, correct? Excuse me, Charles, play Exhibit 14. Now you said, yes, this is a screenshot between the conversation, correct?
It shows a text conversation.
And at the top, it shows your name, correct?
I guess, I'm sorry, Mr. Graham, I've never seen these before.
Now, Charlton, would you please highlight the third message on this, or the third gray on this message? Ms. Becker, would you please read the first highlighted text to the court?
I'm very sorry, Mr. Graham, but I've never seen these before.
Ms. Becker, I understand that you're claiming that. Would you please read these to the court?
Okay. Well, if he's still upset about his car, then he's going to be really upset when he sees what I do to his house. I'm going to wait until he's at work, then break in and trash it. That'll show him.
Thanks, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
All right, any redirect?
No redirect.
All right, thank you. Defense can call their next witness.
The defense calls Taylor Perkins to the stand.
All right, the witness is constructively sworn. Go ahead.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Perkins.
Good afternoon.
Could you state your name and spell it for the court?
Taylor Perkins, Taylorperkins.
All right, could you start by telling us about your connection with this case?
So I was on the mock trial team at Colorado High School and with my best friend Avery, and we were both seniors.
All right, and what was Avery's role in the team?
Well, Avery loved it like nothing else, and she always wanted to be a lawyer, and she was really good at it. But she did a lot of improvisation and wasn't prepared, but she still was the best lawyer on our team.
All right. And did Avery get along with everyone on the team?
She got along well with most of the team members, but some people were bitter about how well she did.
All right, and how did she get along with Alex Fuentes?
Not the greatest. On the surface, they were polite, but Avery was the star of the mock trial team and Alex wasn't, which caused some tension between them.
And how did you get along with Alex?
Alex always came off as insincere or passive aggressive to me.
Let's talk a little bit about what happened with Avery and the mock trial team. What happened before regionals to change Avery's status with the team?
So Avery showed up extremely unprepared about a month before last year's regionals, and Coach Brackman just lost it. So he demoted her to the B team.
After he demoted her, what did you do?
Well, I left the team because I thought it would be like our best bet to get Avery back onto the A team.
And whose idea was that?
It was completely mine. Avery did not ask me to do it. I just knew it was the right thing.
And once Avery was back on, were there any more problems?
Well, Coach Brackman and Avery got into a fight, and Avery wrote on his car.
What did Coach Brackman do after he saw the damage to his car?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Response?
Your Honor, the witness is not speculating as to Coach Brackman's personal feelings. He is speculating simply to the sequence of events that were common knowledge to everybody.
Okay. I'm going to sustain the objection. There's going to have to be some foundation as to the basis of this witness's knowledge before he can answer.
All right, now, Mr. Perkins, how do you know about what happened during this incident?
Well, Avery, after she did it, she automatically texted me because she felt horrible about it. She thought it was just a stupid decision that she shouldn't have made.
All right. Now, let's talk about what happened after Avery was kicked off the team. What did the two of you do the Thursday after Avery was kicked off?
We went to the Fry Shack and ran into the rest of the mock trial team, including Alex.
And what day was that?
March 5th, the day before Coach Brackman was killed.
Mm-hmm. And did Avery ever leave her phone out while you were at the Fry Shack?
Yeah, she got upset after talking with Alex and went to the bathroom, leaving her phone on the table. And I stayed and talked with Alex after she left the room. And then when she came back, we just left.
All right. And when did you realize something had happened to Avery's phone?
It was the next morning. Avery wasn't replying to my texts, and because she was coming to pick me up, and she wasn't replying to my texts, so we just decided to. We both figured out that she didn't have her phone.
All right. And what did the two of you do after you realized it was gone?
Well, we decided that there wasn't like anything important going on at school, so we just decided to skip and like go look for it at the mall in the Fry Shack.
All right. And did you ever call Avery's phone?
Yes. We called it with my phone a lot, and it just automatically went straight to voicemail every time.
And when did you find out Coach Brackman was dead?
The same time as the rest of the team, a while after it happened.
And did you and Avery discuss Coach Brackman's death?
Avery and I talked about it, but we had no idea what happened.
Of course. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about Blair Rollins. Do you know Blair Rollins?
Well, Blair went to CHS with us. I wasn't really friends with them because I just thought they were a bit weird.
And what was Blair's reputation in school?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
What's the relevance?
Your Honor, this line of questioning goes extensively to the idea that the defense holds that the police did not properly investigate Mr. Rollins, and this question is an essential part of establishing that.
Your Honor, I do not see how Blair Rollins' reputation has anything to do with the police investigating him.
I'm going to allow it. The objection's overruled.
All right, would you like me to repeat the question, Mr. Perkins?
Yes, please.
What was Blair's reputation in school?
We all thought that Blair was a little bit creepy and violent, especially what happened after her dad's case.
Of course. And did you ever see Blair and Alex together?
All the time.
Do you know if Blair knew Coach Brackman?
Of course Blair knew Coach Brackman.
Why do you say that?
Well, everyone knows that Coach Brackman lost the case that sent Blair's dad to jail.
Was Blair Rollins in school on March 6th?
No,
Have you seen Blair Rollins since Coach Brackman's death?
no, Blair pretty much just disappeared.
Finally, is there any way that Miss Becker could have killed Coach Brackman?
No, she was with me the entire time.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
All right, Ms. Williamson.
Mr. Honor, good evening, Mr. Perkins. You're here testifying on behalf of your good friend, Avery Becker,
Yes.
and she's the one who got you involved in mock trial. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. We thought it would be a great way to hang out.
And you wouldn't have done it if she hadn't. Is that true?
Probably.
Mr. Perkins, even though it was also your senior year in Colorado High School, you stepped down from the mock trial team altogether just for Miss Becker.
Yeah, Avery was the best person on our team, and I thought it was just so unfair to get rid of our best player. And yeah, so I just stepped down.
All right, and Ms. Perkins, after Miss Becker vandalized Mr. Brackman's car, you found this unfair. Is that true?
I don't understand what you're asking.
Did you find it unfair when Mr. Brackman kicked Miss Becker off the team for vandalism?
Yes, because it was a stupid mistake in the moment.
All right, and
Sorry, go ahead.
And because you found this unfair, you decided to help Miss Becker find a way to get back on the team. Is that true?
Well, she took initiative and decided to text everyone and try to get back on to see if they could help her.
Yes, and you were a part of that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. And Miss Becker texted everyone. Is that correct?
Yep, everyone on the mock trial team.
Is that including Alex Fuentes?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, outside the scope of the witness's direct.
Have a response?
Your Honor, I just asked a question whether or not Miss Becker had texted everyone, and I just asked them if they had texted Alex Fuentes as well.
Okay, I'm aware of the question, but that doesn't address whether it's outside the scope of direct.
Correct.
Does it relate to something that was part of the direct examination?
Not specifically, Your Honor, but
Okay, I'm going to sustain the objection.
all right. We'll move on then. Mr. Perkins, I would now like to briefly talk about Blair Rollins. You stated that Blair Rollins was creepy to you. Is that correct?
Yes.
But you would never in a million years would have guessed that Blair Rollins had anything to do with this, would you?
I don't quite understand what you're asking me.
Mr. Becker, did you ever think in a million years that Blair Rollins could have been involved in this at first?
Yeah, of course, after what happened with Blair's father. Well,
Mr. Perkins, could you please answer the question as I ask it? And I'll move on. And your opinion on this changed after Miss Becker informed you of Blair's possible involvement.
yes.
All right, I'm going to quickly move on to the whereabouts of Miss Becker's phone. Did you find it odd when Miss Becker left her phone at the fry shack?
No, not really. She was in an emotional state. Even though it was like her third kidney, she had some conversation with Alex and she just left it on the table and ran to the bathroom.
And after you left the fry shack, you then went to the mall. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And that whole time, Miss Becker did not mention not having her phone.
No.
And yet you claimed that Miss Becker's phone was like her third kidney.
Yes.
All right, no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, any redirect?
A brief one, Your Honor. Mr. Perkins, I'd just like to reiterate, was Miss Becker in a necessarily extremely logical or state of mind when she didn't have her phone?
If you mean in like a emotional state, or yeah, there something happened between her and Alex that caused her to run out of the room, so she probably completely forgot about her phone.
Thank you so much, Mr. Perkins. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Defense can call their last witness.
Thank you. Your Honor, the defense calls Professor Blake Van Owen to the stand.
Okay, Professor. You are constructively sworn in.
Just to clarify to the court, can everyone see and hear me all right?
Yes.
Before we begin, may I have a brief time check?
You have 10 minutes and 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Professor Van Owen. I'd like to start with your background, education, as well as experience. What do you do for a living?
Well, I'm a private investigator, a professor, and an expert witness in police practices.
And where did your experience in these fields begin?
I began in the Aurora Police Department, then worked as a resource officer, security guard, and then went into private investigation.
And what other qualifications have you obtained?
I've earned a master's degree in criminal justice, and in the last 5 years, I've been teaching about police practices and social justice at CU Denver.
And how does your education as well as experience relate to this case?
Well, I have the experience and training to recognize and examine the evidence of this case.
And Professor Van Owen, what would you consider to be your fields of expertise?
Police practices, forensic evidence, and crime scene reconstruction.
And why do you consider these to be your fields of expertise?
Well, I've been accepted as defense expert in over 100 U.S. cases, district courts, with my expertise in crime scene reconstruction and general police investigation tactics, with a specialty in forensic evidence including those 100 cases.
Thank you. At this time, the defense would like Professor Van Owen as an expert in police practices, forensic evidence, as well as crime scene reconstruction pursuant to Rule 702.
Any objection?
No objections at this time, Your Honor. However, permission to conduct a brief voir dire of the witness.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So, Professor, you were only with the police force for 9 months, correct?
You broke up a little. Can you please repeat the question?
Yes. You were only with the police force for 9 months, correct?
That is correct. I got disillusioned with police work, but I got plenty of experience while I was there.
Professor, isn't it true that you haven't been in the police force for around 15 years?
While I've not been in the police force directly, I've done things that require my experience and training and have helped me broaden my horizons of police expertise.
You haven't been certified in any of the police's more recent practices, correct?
That isn't completely true.
Excuse me, can you repeat your answer?
That isn't completely true.
Okay. And you're basing your whole police practice experience from 15 years ago based only of 9 months of actual hands-on experience. Is this correct?
No, because I've had experience that uses the skills I learned from police officing in my day-to-day life.
Thank you. Now, about your crime scene reconstruction and investigation, isn't it true that you've only testified as an expert in crime scene reconstruction 8 times?
Can you repeat the last part? I'm so sorry.
It's fine. Isn't it true that you've only testified as an expert in crime scene reconstruction 8 times?
That is correct.
And you have no listed experience from this field, is this correct?
Well, no, I have done things that have given me experience and training.
Professor, I asked listed experience. Do you have any listed experience?
No, I have not listed my experience, but I've been accepted in 100 district courts and I have qualifying training.
And you have no specific training in any of these subjects, is this correct?
I have training in some of the subjects.
I asked for specific training. Do you have any specific training?
No, not in particular.
Thank you, Your Honor. Although I have no objection to the witness testifying as an expert in forensic data, I do object to the witness not testifying as an expert in crime scene reconstruction investigation or police practices, because the defense has not provided sufficient evidence of knowledge, experience, or any of the sort.
Okay, I think based on her prior record of having been accepted as an expert, I'm going to recognize the professor as an expert in the areas listed. Go ahead.
Thank you. Professor Van Owen, how did you come to be involved with this case?
Oh, well, I was hired by the defense because they were worried that the prosecution was mishandling this case.
And once you were hired, what activities did you conduct?
Well, I reviewed the police reports and crime scene reconstruction conducted by Kyle Kuzak, as well as the cell tower reports and exhibits prepared by Detective Markowitz. Additionally, I've conducted my own partial investigation in areas I feel neglected by prior investigation.
I'd like to talk about the police's efforts to investigate. What did you notice?
I noticed that there's many inconsistencies with the first investigation, such as the alleged murder weapon, scene of the crime, and many other clues that would have helped us reach a more concrete conclusion.
Your Honor,
can you describe?
Just a second. Do you have an objection?
No, however, I do request that the attorney and witness speak a little slower. It's hard for me to understand.
Yeah, we're starting to have problems with our internet connection, and I think various people are breaking up, so everyone try talking a little slower.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Of course, I will take care. Professor Van Owen, what did you determine about the appearance of the intruder?
Well, Exhibit 12 shows that the intruder's build could not have been much bigger than Mr. Brackman himself.
And in your investigation, you investigated the alleged murder weapon. What caught your attention about it?
Well, I noticed that the knife used is a completely different brand and style than those in the knife block, and also the formation of the handle will cause someone to hold it in a certain way.
And what does this suggest to you?
Well, this suggests that Mr. Brackman would have been stabbed from behind. That as well would completely line up with the stab wound. Thus, this evidence suggests that this was not a spontaneous attack, but more in line with a premeditated murder.
I'd like to talk about the alleged scuffle in this crime scene. How does this connect to the crime?
While the marks of the scene could signify a struggle, you can't carbon date marks to see how old they are. These marks could have been made years before the incident took place.
And now, what did you conclude about the Ring camera that Mr. Brackman owned?
Well, he did have a Ring camera. We don't know if he had his notifications on or if the camera was set up at all. We don't know if Mr. Brackman had his phone on him or even if he had his phone on him, he was paying attention.
And in your expert opinion, do you believe that the prosecution's police investigation was conducted properly?
Objection.
No, I think it was rushed.
A second, I have an objection. What's your objection?
Outside the scope of expertise, the witness is not an expert in police investigations.
You have a response, Ms. Medina?
Yes, Your Honor. The witness seems to have been recognized as an expert in the fields of police practices, forensic evidence, as well as crime scene reconstruction. Standard police practice is to conduct a partial investigation of a crime, which is within the scope of the witness expertise.
Okay, objection's overruled. She can answer the question.
Would you like me to repeat the question, Professor?
Yes, please.
All right. In your expert opinion, do you believe that the prosecution's police investigation was conducted properly?
No, it was rushed, and there could have been things that could have helped us come to a more concrete conclusion.
And in your expert opinion on crime scene reconstruction, what do you think happened on the day of Mr. Brackman's murder?
I believe that Mr. Brackman was stabbed from behind while seated with a knife the intruder had brought onto the scene. This indicates premeditation to commit murder and points away from Avery Becker as the most likely suspect.
And in your investigation, did you find any other suspects for the murder?
I found several possibilities, but the one that stand out to me most was Blair Rowlands.
And why did Blair Rollins catch your attention?
Well, a few months before Mr. Brackman's murder, Brackman had represented Jonathan Rowland, Blair's father, because he had charged with murder. Rollins was convicted and sentenced to life in prison.
And how did you know that Jonathan Rollins wanted revenge?
I listened to a court proceeding from before Rollins was sent to jail.
I'd like to direct your attention to what has been marked as Exhibit 22. Ms. Farrell should be screen sharing that to you.
I'll get you back. The last thing I do.
Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
And what is it?
It's an electronic recording from Jonathan Rowland's court proceeding that I've listened to.
And is this a fair and accurate representation of the court proceeding?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, the defense now moves to admit Exhibit 22 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. The opposing counsel said this was an accurate copy of the court proceeding. However, this is a 4.5-second clip of an unlabeled person speaking.
Okay. Any response to that?
Your Honor, as per under Exhibit 22, my apologies, allow me to pull it up on my computer for accuracy. Yes, Your Honor. Exhibit 22 is simply listed as an audio recording from Jonathan Rowland's court proceeding. If you would like, we could pull up the PDF file if that is what Mr. Alcanes is referring to.
No, I think the objection is that the person speaking is not identified. Can you respond to that?
The person oh, I'm sorry, please continue.
No, go ahead and respond.
All right. We have laid enough foundation to establish that the person speaking is Jonathan Rollins.
I'm going to sustain the objection. I'm not going to admit the exhibit.
All right, thank you. Investigation, Professor Van Owen. When you heard about Jonathan Rollins, do you think this possibility should have affected the prosecution's investigation?
I'm so sorry. Your audio was very cut out. Could you please repeat that question one last time?
In your expert opinion, do you think the possibility of Jonathan Rollins should have affected the prosecution's investigation?
Well, I think this is something worth knowing to bring Mr. Brackman to justice, but unfortunately the prosecution had failed to make investigation of this possibility.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Professor, isn't it true that you quit the police force?
I did. After a certain incident, I became disillusioned with my work, and I prefer to help the justice system more than just being a police officer.
Thank you. And isn't it true that that you left because you injured a woman of color?
Yes, that is true.
Okay, Ms. Medina, I can tell you have an objection, but you're breaking up pretty badly. Try again.
Oh, my apologies. Can you hear me clearly now?
Fairly clearly.
Okay. Well, my objection is pertinent to relevance as well as improper character evidence.
Okay, response?
Your Honor, if you see where I'm going with this, I'm merely laying foundation for the professor's potential bias towards the police and the police force.
Okay, I'm not sure. I'm going to sustain the objection as to identifying this person as a person of color. I don't think that that's relevant, and I think it's inflammatory. So I'm going to sustain the objection. Why don't you try re-asking the question?
Yes, Your Honor. Isn't it true that you left the police force because you were disillusioned with their tactics?
Yes, after a certain incident.
Thank you. That's all you have to say.
I'm not. Okay.
Professor, isn't it true that you now teach those tactics?
Yes, after seeing the police and how corrupt it was, I thought it'd be important to teach about those tactics.
Thank you. And isn't it true that you've been involved with some of the cases handled by Detective Markowitz?
Yes, it's true. Just like this case, I have been involved with Detective Markowitz.
Thank you. And isn't it true that in your statement you've called Detective Markowitz defective?
After seeing how sloppily this case was managed and the fact that it wasn't my job to reanalyze this case and redo it, I was a little frustrated.
Isn't it true that you've met Kyle Cusack?
Yes, I have met him before.
And isn't it also true that you've called Mr. Cusack egotistical?
Again, seeing as how poorly this prosecution job was done, I was definitely a little more than frustrated when doing my
Professor, is that a yes?
yes, after being frustrated by their sloppy job.
Professor, now I'd like to move on to your analysis of the attack itself. You believe this was an organized attack, correct?
All the evidence proves so, yes.
And you believe there was no struggle at all?
No, I do not.
Really? Well,
yes.
Isn't it true that you weren't at the actual crime scene, Professor?
Again, it's not my job. I shouldn't have had to reconstruct this whole crime scene. That was the prosecution's job.
And thank you. So earlier you proposed Mackenzie Brackman was sitting when he was stabbed, correct?
That makes the most sense, yes.
Trial Tech, can you please pull up Exhibit 1? Thank you. Now, Professor, you can confirm that is the doorway of Mr. Brackman's house, correct?
I can.
And you see no chair or anything you'd normally sit on inside. Is that true?
He probably could have gone up after he was stabbed out of shock.
I'm sure. Now, I'd just
Yeah.
like to take a brief moment to discuss the scuff marks in Exhibit 18 and the state of the household in Exhibit 9. So, Trial Tech, can you please pull up those exhibits? Can you confirm those are scuff marks and a broken plate?
Yes, the scuff marks can't be carbon dated, so they could have been made years prior to the incident.
Professor.
And
Professor?
I'm sorry, you're cutting out. Can you please repeat what you just said?
I was just asking you to give me a yes or no.
Oh, yes, the evidence is there.
Thank you. And isn't it true that scuff marks and a broken plate could indicate a struggle?
Yes, but not very likely in this situation.
And wouldn't you say the background in Exhibit 9 on the left represents a clean household other than that broken plate on the floor?
Yes, I can.
So would you say these scuff marks seem out of place in such a tidy household?
No, scuff marks can be made by any incident, moving a chair too fast, accidentally bumping into something.
Thank you. Now, Professor, I'd just like to move on. Isn't it true that you didn't obtain cell tower records on March 5th?
Again, wasn't really my job. That's the prosecution's job.
Yes. Well, and because you didn't receive these records or pull these records, you cannot confirm that Avery Becker and Taylor Perkins were at the Fry Shack looking for Becker's phone?
No, but the thing with cell phone evidence is it's very finicky. So it's more than likely that they were there since they have two testimonies and alibis.
Thank you. Now I'd just like to transition to my last little bit about your investigation and final analysis. Isn't it true you conducted a brief investigation of your own?
Yes, after seeing how poorly this was done, I thought it was necessary.
And isn't it true that the defense is paying you around $7,000 for your work in this case?
I do expect to be paid for my efforts, yes.
And you charge around $225 an hour. Is this also correct?
After giving my expert opinion and reconstructing something I haven't had to do, I do expect to be paid, yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, may the court take judicial notice that 7,000 divided by 225 is 31.
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy, but I'll take your word for it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Professor, this means you only worked 31 hours on this case. Is this correct?
Objection, Your Honor. The defense doesn't see how this information is relevant to the case at all.
Overruled. You can answer the question.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, Professor, doesn't this mean that you only worked 31 hours on this case?
Yes, after reconstructing a crime scene I shouldn't have had to do.
Professor, I'd like to move on. And 31 hours is a little under a day and a half. Is this correct?
As I said before, I've done a lot of extra work.
Thank you. You called the police investigation rush, correct?
Yes, very.
And yet you only spent 31 hours looking at this case?
Again, it wasn't my job to reconstruct the whole scene. That was the
Thank you.
police's job.
Thank you. Your Honor, no further questions.
Any redirect?
Very brief redirect, Your Honor. Professor Owen, were you required to reconstruct the crime scene of your own volition?
No, not at all. That wasn't my job.
And as a defense expert, are you paid for your work?
Yes, just like some other lawyers here, I do expect to be paid for my efforts.
And are you paid for your work because your work as a crime scene reconstruction police practice, as well as forensic evidence investigator, is your full-time job?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. All right, we're ready to move to closing arguments, I believe, correct? And we'll start with the closing argument for the people, the prosecution.
Your Honor, just to clarify, can everyone in the court hear and see me?
I can.
May it please the court? Your Honor, members of the jury, my name is Tyler Graham, and I, along with co-counsel, represented the people of Colorado in today's case. Today, we have shown you that nothing provokes vengeance like pride. On Friday, March 6th, Mackenzie Brackman was found dead in his home with a stab wound in his upper back. Now, this fact is undisputed. Mr. Brackman spent his life teaching the young and defending the innocent. One of the other students Mr. Brackman coached was a student by the name of Alex Cifuentes. Now, Alex Cifuentes was a purse and close friend of the defendant, Avery Becker. This Avery Becker was also taught by Mr. Brackman. However, today we have shown that Avery Becker took Mr. Brackman's life. First, from the prosecution, you heard Detective Jordan Markowitz. He laid out the foundation for each and every one of the accusations against Avery Becker. Detective Jordan Markowitz walked us through the details of his investigation, and he showed you, through the use of Exhibit 16, that Avery Becker had traveled from her house at the start of this exhibit to the bottom of the house, which is where Mr. Brackman's house. Now, this happened at the exact times of the murder. Then, the prosecution brought Kyle Kuzak to the stand. He testified to how each of these crimes happened, as well as the state the perpetrator left the house in. And you will see through the exhibits that he brought in, there was clearly a struggle. These scuff marks on the right-hand side of the screen showed that there was a physical struggle between the victim and the perpetrator. And on the left, you see a broken plate, clearly indicating a struggle. Finally, you heard from Alex Cifuentes, and she revealed a first-hand account of the defendant's actions leading up to the days of the murder. You heard that Avery Becker was demoted down to B team before she manipulated her sidekick, Avery Becker, to leave the team, so Mr. Brackman had no other choice but to put Avery Becker back. The defendant stated they were writing on the board when Mr. Brackman walked in, and they stated they were writing on it with a dry erase marker. However, their sworn statement says something completely different. It says they were about to write, meaning they hadn't been writing on the board. Now, members of the jury, this may seem like a small misunderstanding, but what it really is a blatant lie. Now, the defendant was under oath, and this begs the question, if they're lying about this, what else are they lying about? From the defense's expert witness, Blake Van Owen, she told you that it wasn't her job to reconstruct the crime scene, and she was qualified to reconstruct it. However, it wasn't her job, which makes you wonder, why was Blake Van Owen being paid over $7,000 for only 31 hours of work? You also heard from the defendant that they had never seen the text messages between Alex Cifuentes' phone and Avery Becker's phone. However, multiple times during this trial, they were displayed on the screen before Avery Becker said that. Was Avery Becker not paying attention to her own trial? Today, you've heard the marvelous tale of two students who were supposedly together. However, we have proven to you today that Avery Becker is not only a liar, but also has a story that simply does not add up with Taylor Perkins. Members of the jury, in today's case, we have shown you that nothing provokes vengeance like pride. The prosecution has met our burden of proof, and we've shown you beyond a reasonable doubt that Avery Becker was at the house at the time of the murder. Avery Becker stated they would get back at Mr. Brackman if it was the last thing she did. We request you hold her to her word. Find Avery Becker guilty of all the charges against her. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. And for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Just give me one moment to make sure everything's going on as it should be. Can you all hear and see me correctly?
Yes.
All right, members of the jury, you are here today to decide the fate of Avery Becker. The prosecution would like you to believe that they have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that she is guilty. They have not. Throughout the course of this trial, we have shown you that their investigation was sloppy, their evidence selective, and their case circumstantial. You heard from Detective Jordan Markowitz and Kyle Cusack, who came to their conclusion that Avery did in fact kill Mr. Brackman using limited evidence and sloppy technique. By all accounts, they seem to have decided that Miss Becker was the culprit before ever looking into evidence for her guilt. If they hadn't, they would have seen that other avenues should have been explored. They conducted an investigation that relied on text that could have easily been doctored and the location of a lost phone that was within the general area of Mr. Brackman's house on the day of the crime, not even concretely at the scene. Much of their other evidence of the scene was irreparably damaged, casting further doubt on the investigation. To see just how mishandled this case was, one must look no further than the suspect never investigated, Blair Rollins, a student with a grudge against Mr. Brackman for putting her father in prison for life, who just so happens to be of the same height and build as Avery Becker, who would have taken the same route as Avery Becker to get to Mr. Brackman's house, who was not at school on March 6th, and who has since disappeared. However, the prosecution declined to investigate this possibility, which isn't only worrying but cast doubt on the entire investigation. If they simply ignored the indications pointing towards Ms. Rollins, what else could they have missed? You then heard from expert witness Blake Van Owen, who further highlighted the rushed nature of the investigation and the flawed logic in the police's reconstruction of the scene. Her appraisal of the knife used to murder Mr. Brackman and of the alleged scuffle at the crime scene only cement the impression of an investigation that missed critical facets. It reminds us that the evidence doesn't point to anybody concretely, let alone the defendant. We then heard from Avery Becker herself and her best friend, Taylor Perkins, who let us in on the details of what the prosecution is trying to claim to be the motive. Petty drama of a high school club. Well, Miss Becker and Mr. Brackman didn't always see eye to eye. The leap from frustrations to burglary and murder is a hard one to make. They also recount the details of where they were that day. looking for a lost phone, a story that is soundly supported by the cell data records that the prosecution's own detective Markowitz produced. Their testimony only proves what the prosecution should have known all along. Avery's alibi is solid. Her motive is questionable at best, and the only evidence linking her to the scene of the crime is a video of somebody with a vaguely similar height and build, a lost phone in the area of Mr. Brackman's house, and texts that nobody other than Alex Cifuentes, who never liked Avery, has ever seen. But then the question becomes, how did Mr. Brackman die? Could it have been at the hands of Blair Rollins, revenge for father's life sentence? We don't know. Could it have been a setup by Alex Cifuentes to get rid of a longtime rival? We don't know. Could it have just been a tragic accident? The result of a random home invasion gone wrong? We don't know. And there is a reason for that. Because this case was gravely mishandled, the blame for this crime is being laid on the wrong person, and true justice may never be found. The prosecution must prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Avery Becker killed Mackenzie Brackman. They have not done this. The case for Avery's guilt is circumstantial. The investigation into Avery's guilt was sloppy and rushed. The evidence for Avery's guilt is entirely selective. For a conviction, the questions of Alex Cifuentes and Blair Rollins, of the missing phone and the lost texts, must be answered. In failing to do so, the prosecution has also failed to meet their burden of beyond a reasonable doubt. The only thing more tragic than the death of Mackenzie Brackman would be to send one of his own students to prison for a crime that she didn't commit. And for that reason, we ask you to declare the defendant, Avery Becker, not guilty on all charges. Thank you so much for your time today.
All right, thank you. Rebuttal closed for the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I start, I'd like to briefly request a time check.
41 seconds for rebuttal.
Thank you, counsel. Members of the jury, opposing counsel claims that there was petty drama between Avery Becker and the victim. Well, riding on the victim's beloved Porsche with a permanent marker sounds a lot more than just petty to me. Opposing counsel also claims there was a second suspect. However, even if this was remotely possible, did Alex Cifuentes lie under oath? They absolutely did not. Did Avery Becker? They most definitely did. Members of the jury, we have met our burden of proof. We request you find Avery Becker guilty of all charges. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. If everybody wants to, you can turn your video on now. We'll see how it works. I want to thank you all. You guys all did a great job. The scoring panel is going to take a couple of minutes and tote up their scores and get them to the coordinators. I just want to say briefly that I appreciate everyone's performance here today. It's so much harder given the fact that we have to do this by Zoom. I'm very impressed by how everybody handled that. I can't imagine it didn't up the stress level a little bit for everyone. It certainly did for me. And I will tell you that the professional attorneys who've been appearing in front of me this way, it's kind of hit and miss how well they do with the technology. So I think you guys should be real proud of yourselves dealing with these difficult circumstances. On top of that, putting that aside, your presentations were all excellent. I've, over the years, judged high school competitions, college competitions, and law school competitions. And I'm always amazed by the fact that high school competitors can certainly hold their own with any of them. So you guys should feel real good about what you've done. And it's obvious that you've worked very hard to prepare, both the attorneys and the witnesses. So I'm not going to go into any specifics in terms of who did what, but I just think that you all should be proud of what you've done. I wish you luck in the competition. I don't know whether any of the other scoring judges are ready to speak, but if you want, you can jump in.
I just want to speak in general that I agree with Judge Langer that you were all so professional, and especially in light of the breaking up, all the technical difficulties that come, which is also like the first time that this has been done virtually, I believe. And you all just completely rolled with the punches, and I was 100% impressed. So thank you for allowing me to witness you guys, and I hope that you all go to law school.
And I will agree with Fern and with Your Honor. I think that you guys were terrific. I was engaged throughout the trial. I'm actually amazed for, that you're in high school and you're able to do as well as you do. So I think everybody did a terrific job.
I agree with all those comments. I just, there's not much you could do to really smooth this out anymore. I did think a couple of the witnesses talked so fast it was hard to follow a little bit, and it would be helpful. Just be in tune to that. You know your case so well, but we don't know it. And so if you're noticing that, ask them to just slow down a little. And don't be smart, Alex. There wasn't much of that for the most part.
Ms. Kerrigan, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute. Have you gotten your scores in?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay, I just got an email that we're not supposed to chat because we're supposed to.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, mine are in.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's good.
I thought we were. Anyway, that's about all that I have. I thought there were some specifics of laying foundation and stuff like that you just did really, really well. I've got some individual notes here, but I'm not going to go into all that.
All right. Well, thank you all. You all deserve to feel good about what you've done today. And as I said earlier, good luck in the competition. So have all three scoring judges gotten their scores in? Okay.
I have.
All right. Thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and shut down the Zoom meeting. Good luck, guys. Good luck in the future.
Your Honor.
Members of the jury.